St Sepulchre's stands at the western threshold of the city, right where Holborn Viaduct drops you into the square mile. For centuries, this was the edge of London, without Newgate, just outside the old city walls, and the largest parish church in the city rose here like a gatekeeper. For centuries, the church stood directly opposite Newgate Prison, which is now the Old Bailey, London's most notorious jail. Every condemned prisoner passed this church on their final journey to Tyburn. The cart would often pause outside the door so the prisoners could take a last drink of ale, a small act of mercy paid for by a local bequest. The night before an execution, St Sepulchre's bellman would walk into Newgate with a lantern and a handbell, stopping outside each cell to speak to the condemned, and at midnight the church rang with the execution bell, the sound that told them their last day had come. Step inside though, and the tone changes completely. Even the altar carries the story of the church's survival. Beside it, on the north wall of the sanctuary, are the remains of what's believed to be a medieval Easter sepulchre, one of the few fragments of the pre-fire church that survived. Robert Ascham, tutor to Elizabeth I, was buried here in 1568. Above the memorial to Richard Reeve, the stained glass glows with Victorian colour, part of the 19th century reimagining of the church after centuries of change. St Sepulchre's is filled with stained glass from different eras, and each window carries its own story. Some belong to the Victorian rebuild, full of deep reds and blues telling familiar biblical scenes, the Annunciation, the Nativity, the Resurrection, all rendered in that rich devotional style the Victorians loved. Others are memorial windows, dedicated to parishioners, musicians and Londoners whose lives were woven into this church. You'll find windows honouring local families, wartime dead and long-forgotten benefactors whose names survive only in coloured light. And then there's the musical windows, the ones that make this the National Musicians' Church. St Cecilia, patron saint of music, stands surrounded by musical angels, their instruments raised in a silent hymn. Beneath her is Sir Henry Wood, founder of the Proms, commemorated here where he once learned of the organ as a young man. Taken together, the windows form a kind of visual choir. Some sing of faith, some of memory, some of music, but all of them turn the daylight into stories. In the side chapel, the atmosphere shifts again. This quieter space gathers smaller memorials and private dedications, the kind of place where people have slipped in for centuries to light a candle, say a prayer, or simply sit with their thoughts. And each of these little cushions on the floor is dedicated to one of their memories. Just beyond is the Royal Fusiliers Memorial Chapel, because this is the regimental church of the Royal Fusiliers, a place where the regiment's history and memory are held with real care. And there's a beautiful story from the years after World War I. One London mother visited the Book of Remembrance every week to touch her son's name. She never spoke to anyone, she simply opened the book, rested her hand on the page and left. The chapel became a place where private grief could sit safely inside a public memorial. St Sepulchre's pulls so many threads together: music, memory, history, loss and hope, and it's honestly ended up being one of my favourite churches so far. And it's been actually really nice doing a city church that isn't one of Wren's for a change. This place just has its own voice, something a bit different, and that's something I really like. Thanks again for watching the Pew Review, and I'll see you again on the next one. Thanks for watching.